to the Lowe Post podcast. The NBA Finals are over. The Denver Nuggets of Denver. The Nuggets are NBA champions, champions of the world, world's champions, just champions. The Miami Heat, after an incredible playoff run, I think they finished 13-10 in the playoffs, 2-7 in their last 9 games, but they gave it a hell of a run, a delightful time all through May and June. And now it's off-season time. The world rumors are swirling. The smoke screens have been sent in every direction to help us navigate the draft part of it, the free agency part of it, a dynamic duo like no other. Jonathan Givony, how are you?
I'm doing great, Zach. How are you?
Bobby Marks. What's
Hello,
up, buddy?
gentlemen? What's going on?
From sunny Florida. Is it sunny in Florida?
We've gotten the humidity has finally taken over the southwest part of Florida. We are in humid season, but I'll be in Bristol, so I only come when it's above 80 degrees. So make sure
Bristol, Connecticut, a top 8,000 most exciting town in America, according to Bristol Magazine. Okay, before we move on to all the buzz that's going on, I just want to take a moment because I don't like how fast we move. It's just me. I'm a purist in this sense. The finals and the championship is the whole reason we do this. All this buzz that we're about to get into, it's all to get where the Denver Nuggets just got for the first time in the history of their franchise. It's all now to try to compete with the Nuggets team that looks set up to be really, really good for quite a while, as long as Jokic and Murray are healthy. And Denver fans, I will, knock on wood, should have a very special Denver guest on early next week. They just wanted to get through the parade first. The parade, I think, is starting shortly in Denver. But before we move on, I do want to say, I just want to read some Jokic stuff. In this past playoff run, 20 games, Jokic averaged 30 points, 13.5 rebounds, 9.5 assists. So very close to a 30-point triple-double every single game. Shot 55% from the floor, 46% on threes, 57% on twos, 80% on 7 free throws a game. So 50, 40, 80 shooting, basically. If you round up from 79.9. For his career in the playoffs, can he get it done in the playoffs? What has he ever accomplished in the playoffs outside of making the conference finals? For his career, 27.5 points, 12 rebounds, 7.5 assists on 53% shooting, 41% from 3. That's his career stats in the playoffs. 68 playoff games. Here are some other interesting figures. 27.5 points per game in the playoffs is now 9th all-time among every person who has played in the playoffs. Minimum some amount of games. Exactly almost 1 point behind LeBron James. The names above Jokic, the 8 names who had averaged more points per game in the playoffs: Michael Jordan, Luka Doncic, Allen Iverson, Kevin Durant, Jerry West, LeBron James, Devin Booker, Donovan Mitchell. That's it. Rebounding. He's 17th all time in rebounds per game in the playoffs. All the names above him except Charles Barkley are old timers. Bill Russell, Wilt Chamberlain. Bill Russell's career rebounds per game. Take a shot. Bobby, you go first, alphabetical order. What do you think Bill Russell's career rebounds per game in the playoffs is?
21.5.
Givony?
23.
Just even. Givony wins. 24.9 rebounds per game. Wilt Chamberlain, Wes Unseld, Bob Pettit, Walt Bellamy, Mel Daniels, Dave Cowens, Moses Malone, not quite an old timer, George Mikan, Nate Thurman, Elvin Hayes, Elgin Baylor, Charles Barkley, Artis Gilmore, Walter Dukes, Dolph Schayes, and Jokic. Assists, he's 19th all time. A couple of guys above him on the list have not played very much in the playoffs. Numbers 3 and 4 all-time assists per game in the playoffs are John Wall and Trae Young. I mean, so he's top 20 in the playoffs in scoring, rebounding, and assists. And for as much as we hear about how selfless he is, and he is, he's highest rated in scoring among all three of those categories, 27.5 per game in the playoffs. Player efficiency rating for those who care, and I understand some people don't. Bobby, where do you think Nikola Jokic ranks in player efficiency rating for all time in the playoffs?
Man, I don't. To have a PR higher than 30?
He
Where
does not.
rank?
His PER is 29.02 in the playoffs.
Right at it. Yeah.
That ranks number one in the history of basketball over Michael Jordan. Okay, so, look, that's not everyone's cup of tea. Win shares per 48 minutes in the playoffs. Another advanced stat that some people like, some people don't. Number one, Michael Jordan. Number two, George Mikan. Number three, LeBron James. And in a virtual tie with LeBron James, Nikola Jokic. I just want to put it in perspective. This is the greatness that this guy is and that we are seeing. And so then I put it to you guys, a question we had on NBA Today before game 5 in Denver. Nikola Jokic is 28 years old. I just read you the stats. Givony, I'll give you first crack. The question posed to us, and it's one of these sort of silly TV questions, but it's fun. It makes you think. For the next 5 years, you own an NBA franchise for the next 5 years. And obviously, the question does not tell you whether your franchise is currently good or currently bad, currently old, currently young, whatever. You own a franchise. You have your choice. You can have Nikola Jokic for the next 5 years, or you can have any other player in the field for 5 years. Jonathan Givony, what is your answer to that question? We all had to answer it on TV. Now I'm making you guys do it.
I'm taking Jokic because he's 28 years old, but he's only been playing basketball seriously for 10 years now. And we see the way that he's improving year after year, averaging 10 assists a game this year, shooting 41% for three. I don't think that we've seen the best of Nikola Jokic yet. And so I'm taking him because I just feel that his game is not based on his athleticism. And, he never gets hurt. So, I think he's going to still be.
I'm knocking on the wood. I don't want anyone to get hurt. I get nervous when people, but he does seem impervious to injuries. Not jumping, I think, barely jumping, I think helps.
For sure. And now that he's become this 40+% 3-point shooter who, is basically the best passer in the NBA. You can run your whole offense through him. He's basically unguardable. We saw that. And then the defense much improved, when I first started watching him, couldn't guard a chair in the NBA. It's why it was, first year, he didn't play as much as he probably should have. So he's getting better and better. And so I don't see any reason why he's not going to be an incredibly dominant guy still when he's 31, 32, 33. He's the best player in the NBA right now. If he can keep, adding to his game, I definitely take Jokic all day.
Mr. Marks.
The same with me. I just look at it. If I'm building a team, I can just plug in guys around him. And B, that, there's so many good things that he does that he's not pigeonholed out one thing. Right. Whether it be playing point forward, whether initiating the offense, playing through him. I would take him because I can put certain players around him and they all don't have to be high level caliber players here. Plug and play guys.
I thought hard about it, as I tend to do, and I don't want to be a prisoner of the moment, but I also took Jokic over the field for all the reasons that you guys just said, most notably his age and his continued curve that he's still is just it's not even a curve, it's a diagonal straight line. Go ahead.
What about the fact that there's absolutely zero bullshit around him? You don't have to worry about him coming in your office saying, I don't really like the city anymore. I want to get out of here. I talk to my friends in the NBA. That's what they say. That's what keeps them up at night. And that's, they say at any moment, my entire life could come crumbling down because our best player wakes up on the wrong side of the bed, comes into our office and say, trade me or else, so you don't have that concern with Jokic, where you do have that concern with some of these other guys that might be some of the candidates to be picked, for the next 5 years. And that's a huge advantage, like just the way that he sets the culture, the way that teammates gravitate to him. He just looks like such a fun, awesome guy to be around. And that you can't discount that part also.
Well, as the 2019 draft class has taught us, there are other things your best players could do that would keep you up at night and have your whole life sort of unraveling a little bit. By the way, are we going to get the Friday news dump on John Morant tomorrow? Like I have not been asking the league office, like, when is it coming? When is it coming? I got, because I don't care about breaking it, and B, when it comes, it comes. It just felt like it was going to come soon. And Adam Silver said, I just don't want to announce it during the finals out of respect for the Nuggets and the Heat. Well, the finals are over. I'm smelling like a 4:55 p.m. email from Mike Bass as everyone is like heading out and like, oh, there it is. I'm smelling it. It's in the air.
Well, because I think next week it would take away from the draft week, right? Like, so if it's Friday, it's like 3:30, 12:30,
right after the parade.
Yeah.
Let him get through the parade, Zach.
5:02 p.m. Friday. Ding. Okay. So the only three players I really seriously thought about in the field are Giannis, self-explanatory, Luka, self-explanatory, and 4 years younger than Jokic, and Wembanyama. I mean, that's like, I think he has to be in the conversation. And I got pushback from Perk and RJ saying, well, he hasn't played a game in the NBA. We don't know how he is. I'm just saying 5 years. If there's a subset of NBA executives and coaches who think he's walking in the door and has a chance to be an all-star, not a fake, like the fans vote him in all-star or a K-pop band votes him in all-star, like a real actual all-star, then he's got to be in the discussion. He just has to be. He's 18, 19 years old, whatever he is. You could make an argument, I guess, for Tatum. Devin Booker got some love. Those were only the three. And the way I would describe Jokic is this, and then we'll move on, I promise. He's the best passer in the NBA. He's the best low post scorer in the NBA. So right away, I don't think that combination of things has ever been seen before. He's an elite mid-range scorer off the catch and off the dribble. He is a very good three-point shooter. If you switch, you're dead. If you run him off the arc, he's an incredible pump and drive, make the next pass guy. If you send a third defender flying into his vision, he's going to make the right pass every time. That's like 10, 12 discrete offensive skills I just named. And he's not just good at each of them, he's great at each of them. And basketball has never seen a player who is great. And remember, this all starts from being the best passer in the NBA, not just a good passer, not just like, yeah, you can get 4 or 5 assists, like the best. Basketball has never seen a guy who's great at every one of those discrete skills and also 7 feet tall or 6'11" and huge and strong. It just never happened before. So I think he can continue to get better. And so I took Jokic, and congratulations to the Denver Nuggets. It might have been the wildest post-championship locker room I've ever been in. I mean, they were going bananas. Everybody was offering me drinks, and I said, come on, guys, I can't drink with you. I'm not on the team and I'm in public until... And it's always the Australians. It's always from Aaron Baines to Jack White. Jack White saw me in the locker room and it just walked by me with a bottle of champagne and said, I'm not going to try and do an Australian accent, said, if you're in this locker room, you have to drink this now. And I'm like, I'm not going to fight with Jack White. And so there was no one around. I took a swig and moved on. The amount of cigar smoke in the air was definitely a health risk. And it was just a delightful scene. And Michael Malone, I saw he's wearing his stick that in your pipe and smoke it t-shirt. He's still making cracks about the Lakers. Michael Malone is doing the championship right. Enough politeness, enough like faux humility. This is fun times. So congratulations to the Denver Nuggets. Either of you have any parting thoughts on the Nuggets or the finals or anything of that nature?
I just thought that at the end of the day, the Murray injury in 2021 almost bought them time, because we would be talking about this team if they had lost, if they were completely healthy, right? If after the Gordon trade and Murray was healthy and Porter Jr. didn't have any setbacks, and let's say they lose in the first round, they lose in the second round, we would be talking coming, oh, we're gonna have to break them up. They, they can't play together. What happens with Jokic? All these different things where it almost like, I don't want to say we gave them a pass, but it just bought them time until Murray came back healthy, because they basically they got Terry Stotts fired that 1 year in Portland after they beat them in the first round and then lost to Phoenix. And then last year they lose to Golden State in the first round. And we all just kept saying like, well, when Murray comes back, there'll be I think that's going to be their window here. And I think that year and a half just kind of, I thought it just bought them time for this roster.
I'm glad we continue this, because that one point I wanted to make is immediately they win. And even before they won, when they were up 3-1, the next set of articles and TV segments is, are the Nuggets going to be a dynasty? And we can't just live in a normal world. We have to go from one extreme, which is like everyone, like whole panels picking the Lakers over the Nuggets, to now, is this an unbeatable dynasty? And I understand the sentiment. And this team will enter the league next year, barring craziness in free agency, the favorites to win the title. They could be the favorites to win the title going into the next 4 seasons. Like, their window is that wide open. When people start doing the dynasty thing, A, I don't know what it means. And B, I just think it undersells how hard it is to win one championship. The Spurs never repeated, ever, famously. They won 5 in 15 years. In an alternate universe where the cap spike doesn't happen, like, there's a chance the Warriors have 1 or maybe 2 titles in 7 or 8 years. I actually think they probably get more than that, but like, it's just, people go right, like, oh, are they going to 4-peat? It's just really, really hard to win one. And if this is the only one they get with Jokic, that's not going to mean the era is necessarily a disappointment. If they don't get another one until 2027, that's totally reasonable. In terms of, you mentioned the Warriors, and I'm done talking about the road to the championship and, the play-in teams they face and all that. I thought it was actually a pretty solid road all the way around. If you're talking about teams that they were quote unquote fortunate not to see, I think in the West, it's really only the Warriors, just because of Curry and the way he stresses out Jokic. But I think they win that series anyway. No one else in the West that they didn't face is like, oh my God, they avoided the Clippers, who are never healthy and their guys never play. Oh boy, I'm sure they were scared of the Clippers, who they beat the hell out of every time they play. And in the East, it's Milwaukee. Well, Giannis got hurt and then they fell on their faces. And Boston, I had a conversation with a front office guy yesterday who said, I still think Boston is the best team. Boston's the best team. Boston's got the best roster. If they could only just get their shit together in crunch time, they'll be the best team next year too. And I'm like, at what point does this is just what Boston is? This whole, they make it so hard on themselves. They have trouble closing games. Like, maybe Tatum and Brown grow out of that. They're still young, but for now, that's not, that's a feature, not a bug of the Boston Celtics. That's just who they are. We have a lot of evidence that that's just who they are. So anyway, that's my Nuggets take. Givony, now we turn to your time of the year, the mock draft. Starting at the top, congratulations to Andrew Sharp for the tweet of the year. My friend Andrew Sharp, who, upon the reports from Woj yesterday that the Wizards and Bradley Beal are working on potential trades, which we will get to, tweeted earnestly, so earnestly that he actually fooled some well-meaning people, that I know something to the effect of, I know the Spurs love Wemby, but when a name like Bradley Beal becomes available, you'd have to think Pop at least thinks about moving the number 1 pick. And there were some people who were like, are you serious? This is ridiculous. No, he's not serious. He's a Wizards fan having fun. So I think we can skip the number 1 pick, Givony. The drama start there, and boy, is there a lot of drama at the top. The drama starts with Charlotte at number 2, and then Portland at number 3, with Brandon Miller and Scoot Henderson being the names there. Tell me the latest intel from Charlotte, because I know you've got some.
So both Scoot Henderson and Brandon Miller worked out this week in Charlotte, and Scoot Henderson definitely was the better of the two, I was told, in terms of the conditioning level, in terms of, just the explosiveness. And, I mean, Scoot Henderson in many ways is built for a 1-on-0 workout. I mean, when you see him, like, he's not tall, but he's jacked, and he's so explosive with the way that he changes gears, and he just punishes the rim every time. And he's a very good mid-range shooter. I mean, a lot of people criticize Scoot for his lack of perimeter shooting and all that. True, he was not a great three-point shooter this year. He shot 33% in the G League, but he's got a good mid-range game, and so I don't know that moves the needle entirely for Portland. I mean, for Charlotte, I'm been told that, Brandon Miller's still ahead there, but it's not like 100%. And, we have this kind of elephant in the room out there with the ownership situation, like, what if, we get some news here in the next few days that it's finalized, and then will there be another voice there that wants to have a say in who they draft? And so, that's kind of the unknown with a week to go. I do think it'll be Mitch Kupchak making the pick, and they've done all the work. But there's still some unknowns out there. And I think Scoot Henderson gave himself a better chance of being the number 2 pick with what he did this week in Charlotte.
The Blazers pick at number 3 after moving up a couple of spots in the lottery. And obviously, what they do to some degree interacts with the future of Damian Lillard. But I guess I would start with this, and either one of you can answer, but Givony, this is more in your wheelhouse, I think. How, and again, this is smokescreen season. It's very hard at this point to discern the truth from the half-truth. How much does Portland care who's there at 3 and who Charlotte takes? Is there room for maneuverability between those two teams if one team definitely wants player X and the other team definitely wants player Y? How much does Portland care?
I haven't asked them that question directly, but I don't think they're in a great spot because they'll just take, whoever is left there between Henderson and Miller. So I don't see why they need to, put assets on the table here to move up, because I think that they really like Brandon Miller and they really like Scoot Henderson, and they'll be really excited, for either of them to be there. And, contrary to, what people think, if the draft were tonight, they're making that pick, unless something crazy comes up, some type of trade that you just can't say no to. At this stage, they haven't had, anywhere near that level of conversation, to get fair value for that pick. And, you very rarely have a chance to get that type of talent like a Brandon Miller or a Scoot Henderson in Portland. And so they're just not going to pass up on that unless, something absolutely incredible comes out of thin air, which, doesn't appear the case right now.
Yeah, I think some teams that have players that they're interested in have kind of turned their noses up at the idea of a package of Simons and number 3. And I wonder how much of that is at least semi-posturing, because I asked a lot of people a very simple question yesterday, a lot of people around the league. Normally there's a cliff between number 1 and everything else, and we overvalue draft picks for the most part, although the top 5 are pretty valuable. I asked, is this number 3 pick, given that it could be Scoot, could be Brandon Miller, is it more valuable than the average number 3 pick? And the answer was almost universally yes. On Simons, every team would want Sharp over Simons. The Blazers are keeping Sharp, as far as I know. I have not heard any. That's almost no one's untouchable, but that's pretty damn close. I haven't loved Simons. Like, he's an undersized guard who has been a very poor defender, at both point guard and shooting guard. And he's signed for 3 more years at good money. But I also think people are underrating Simons a little bit if that's all they see. Like, that guy is a legit, really good pull-up 3-point shooter. Like, one of the best in the league, catch and shoot and pull-ups. He's a really good offensive player. His contract is $24 million next season, 26 the year after, 27.5 the year after that. Like, that's not a $50 million albatross. That's actually not a terrible contract. Like, I think, I'm not saying they're moving that package. I'm just saying, like, I think the teams that are turning their nose up at that package are either posturing a little bit or kind of not maybe thinking all the way through. Bobby, does that make any sense?
No, I mean, it makes it totally sense. I mean, I'm looking at it right now. I mean, it's 18% of the salary cap, which is, certainly well below where where these other numbers are. I think for me, what Portland is that, and I've said this all along, is that, you do something to appease Damian Lillard, or do you do something that protects you in the future with 3 and Shaedon Sharpe, and kind of go in that direction? And because who's to say a year from now, Damian Lillard says, now I want out, right? Like, and I think that's the balancing act that the Trailblazers have. And I think you go into the draft, and if it's Scoot Henderson and he's the best available, you take him, and then you figure it out later. But I do think, I do agree with you, Zach, that basically turning your nose up at 3 and Anthony Simons, like, he's a bucket getter. He can go out and get you points and stuff like that. So, but for me, Portland, I've got them. That's the team I've got circled as far as what direction we go here, and what's the fallout, right? What's the fallout if they stay at 3, and take another young player?
So I think there's the general theory of Portland is that you can either use the pick, like take the young Henderson, let's say, or Miller. You either take that player, and taking that player means you have to trade Damian Lillard. You have sent Damian Lillard the signal that, yes, you are going to have to play with a lot of young guys, and no, we are not necessarily competing for a title. And those two things are untenable. You either trade the pick and keep Damian Lillard, or use the pick and trade Damian Lillard. Mm-hmm. I actually don't think it's that simple. And I think Portland, to Jonathan's point, could try to thread the needle of, no, this prospect is too good. This opportunity is too rare. We moved up in the lottery just to get this opportunity. We tanked another end of the season for the second year in a row just to get this opportunity. And the prospect is actually that good. But we still love having Damian Lillard around. He's the greatest Blazer of all time. Just came off the best season of his career. We can maybe probably re-sign Jeremy Grant, maybe work some other kinds of trades, and, put a pretty good team out there and hope to catch some breaks next year. Like, I think there is a middle path that I think the Blazers certainly think is accessible to them and would not necessarily alienate Damian Lillard. But Givony, what do you make of that?
I think Damian Lillard would be okay with whatever direction they win in, especially making the pick. I mean, he's a basketball junkie. He's in there every morning at every pre-draft workout. He studies players around the league. He studies prospects. He studies the salary cap. He knows trade value. And so, I think he understands that, there isn't a trade out there right now that makes sense for them from an organization standpoint. And so I think the idea that they're going to make that pick at number 3 and Dame is going to storm into the office the next morning and demand the trade, that's completely false. I mean, that's totally overblown. And I think he wants to be in Portland long term, and he also wants to win. And so it's on them to try and do both at the same time, like you said. And there's a pathway there to being a lot better next year. Sharpe makes another step. Anthony Simons makes another step. Scoot Henderson or Brandon Miller, whoever it is, at 3, they make the right signings, and they have the number 23 pick. They make a couple of trades. I mean, I think they're right there in contention for making the playoffs. The West is open enough where that's available to them, especially if Lillard has the kind of season that he had this past year. So yeah, I think it's totally overblown. This whole sentiment that he's going to ask out, and he wants them to just trade the pick for 80 cents on the dollar.
Well,
Bobby?
Jonathan, he made when he did that interview on Showtime, and he knows the lay of land. I mean, he's as smart as it comes. And he said, listen, if I get traded somewhere, like, what's to say, like, based on everything that team has to give up, I'm walking into a better situation. Like, that's the beauty of it, that he could be going somewhere and he might be there and be like, man, I had a pretty good in Portland. I had a better roster in Portland than what I had in New York or Miami or one of those teams. So that's something to certainly consider there.
And I do think Western Conference teams simultaneously view Denver as a juggernaut and also view the rest of the conference as pretty muddled. Like, what's the future of the Warriors? I think they'll probably keep the band together, but we'll talk about them later. What's the future of the Clippers? Like, those dudes don't play. They don't play. So if their representatives walk in Lawrence Frank's office this summer and Trent Redden's office and say, hey, how about the 4-year max extension? How does that conversation go? Does Lawrence Frank have a garbage can next to his desk to vomit in on demand? Phoenix? People came away from that Denver series and they were the only team to win more than a game off Denver in the playoffs. But you got this Chris Paul thing floating in the air. I have no idea what to make of these. Like, could they get Harden to Phoenix? That seems like somewhat unrealistic to me. And the depth is what it is. Like, I don't. And by the way, it hasn't gotten tons of attention because he's Kevin Durant and he was incredible in the first round against the Clippers. This is the second year in the playoffs in a row where I thought that in the Denver series and then the Boston series the year before, back when the Brooklyn Nets existed as a basketball team with 3 superstars, the second year in a row that I thought Durant looked kind of uncomfortable when faced with a really big physical team, like that were able to knock him off his spots a little bit and just create a lot of turnovers and make his looks just uncomfortable and difficult. I just don't sense a lot of like super duper fear of the Suns amid the Western Conference. The Lakers will see it. So anyway, that's the Dame analysis that I have. That I think we can stop the mock draft there for a second, because a lot of the same teams that I think would try to trade for Damian Lillard if he were ever available are this. It's the same bucket of teams that I think will try to trade for Bradley Beal. And Woj reported yesterday that the Wizards under Michael Winger and Mark Bartelstein, Bradley Beal's agent, are planning to / are cooperating on, if the trade is the end game, let's find a place. And of course, the Wizards have to do that because they inexplicably gave Bradley Beal a no trade clause as part of his contract that pays him $46.7 million next year, 50.2 the next season after that, 53.7, 57.1. Bradley Beal's last 4 seasons, 57 games, 60 games, 40 games, 50 games. He has shot from 3 in those seasons, 35%, 35%, 30%, and 36.5%. In 2 of those seasons, he did average over 30 points a game because he shot the lights out on 2s. It's a big contract. I said probably a year ago, maybe to you, Bobby, on this podcast, that there is a large division among league executives about how to value that contract and the Lillard contract because they're so big and so new. We haven't seen contracts that big. Some executives will tell you, yeah, those guys are really good players. Like Bradley Beal's made an All-NBA team. They'll get real value for them. Other executives will tell you they should be happy just to get off the contract. Brian Windhorst echoed that yesterday by saying on TV that people are going to end up being surprised by how quote unquote little the Wizards get back. I think the truth is somewhere in between. I think they'll get real value for him but it's obviously not going to be like a blowaway package of stuff. I do think he's going to get traded. If you ask me to predict it right now, I think he's going to get traded. This is the most real it's ever been. I'm sure there is part of the Wizards that is saying to themselves, well, this guy loves being here. How many stars do you ever love being here? He's really good. Maybe not he's not a first or second team all NBA player. Hasn't made an all-star game. He's made one all-star team since 2019. So he's not like knockout amazing, but he's really good. We have some interesting young players. We own, I think, all but one. They owe one future draft pick somewhere, don't they? Or does that extinguish?
They owe it to New York.
New York. But we own a lot of our picks. Maybe there's a universe where we could bring back Kuzma, bring back Porzingis, bring back Beal, make a couple of trades, and hey, we're competitive and Bradley's happy because Bradley wants to win. That seems unlikely to me and unlikely to happen on the timetable that Bradley Beal will accept. So I'm as of now, June 15th, I'm expecting Bradley Beal to get traded, and maybe very soon. Bobby, what is your assessment of the current Bradley Beal situation?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think, certainly with the Porzingis and the Kuzma options coming up, I think it's the 21st for both. And I think, the likelihood is that one opts in, which would be Porzingis, and one opts out, which is Kuzma. And I think the likelihood is that, the appetite to bring Kuzma back in a high number basically would probably set the wheels in motion for Beal to look at this roster and be like, maybe now is the time, right? We start to get this going here. I looked at it and I went on NBA Today on Wednesday and put up some fake stuff. Some were salary dumps, as you mentioned, some executives believe. So what does a salary dump mean? Does that mean if James Harden goes elsewhere, would Philly give them Tobias Harris and a future first, right? Like in 2030.
That's my reaction. That's what that's my Michael Winger impression.
I almost, certainly we talked about the Heat with Hero and Duncan Robinson, and they've got some ones to move in there. I almost equate, we went through it in Brooklyn in 2012, and Joe Johnson was an older player than Bradley Beal, but we traded, expiring contracts and a future one. And I think there was a pick swap that actually turned out good for Atlanta because it, got him like the 15th pick in the draft. That's kind of how I look at it. I think it's going to be hard to kind of check all the boxes as far as draft pick, young player, expiring contracts there. So you're trying to get somewhere in the middle here. And I think, listen, we're going to be talking about these new collective bargaining agreement rules for a long time here. If there's a team that can debunk the system, it's probably the Heat, right? That can kind of infiltrate the second apron and have Adebayo, Butler, and Beal, and then figure out everything else. It's the Miami Heat.
I like the word, use the word infiltrate, like they have an attack plan. And they're going to.
I had a little Star Wars in me when I was saying that.
It made me think of the famous photo of Andy Ellisberg, their GM and cap guru, blocking the entire Heat roster from entering the Nuggets locker room after Jokic decked Markieff Morris 2 seasons ago. Remember that photo of it's like Andy Ellisberg single-handedly, like freaking Viggo Mortensen in Lord of the Rings, single-handedly stopping an offensive. Jonathan, any initial Beal thoughts you want to get before I start going hog wild on trades?
Not really, just, talking to teams, after the news came out, people said, listen, it's a lot of money and it's very hard to put together a trade. And so it's a complicated situation. And people echoed what Bobby said, like they don't necessarily think they're going to get this incredible haul, that we've seen for other, major stars in the past.
Oh, they're not going to get an incredible haul on the level forget the Durant, Gobert, whatever comps you want. That's not going to happen. So rarely do we get to this stage in a trade, and I just keep coming back to one team. Now we can go through the other teams, and there are a lot of them. The Heat deal just writes itself. It's too easy. By the way they changed the protections on that pick they owe the Thunder, they can now trade 3 firsts. Not saying they would trade all 3, but they can. and you just kind of pick two of Hero, Robinson, Lowry to get to the salary, and you're done. And you could argue that I think Hero, if I'm Washington, I want Hero in the trade. I'm not taking just Lowry and Robinson. If I'm Miami, I might want Hero plus Lowry to be the deal, because if I keep Duncan Robinson, maybe I can just sort of finagle this thing where, like, okay, now I've got a shooter who reproved himself in the playoffs. I don't have to re-sign Strus as a result, because as you said, Bobby, they're over the tax in that scenario with just Butler, Bam, Robinson, Beal, Jovic, Oladipo, who's going to pick up his option, Caleb Martin, Highsmith, who I always just say Haysmith for some reason, Highsmith, and their pick. They're already over the tax. And so bringing back both Strus and Vincent puts them into the apron territory. Bringing back one really gets them there. So that deal just kind of writes itself. And yeah, you're going to kind of be in roster building prison with Beal, Butler, and Bam. Although that's when Bam signing that max, that lower max after your rookie scale contract kind of comes back to help you. We can go through the Warriors, the Bucks, the Sixers, the Celtics, who I don't really think are going to get into this. I think the Kings are a team to watch. The Knicks, were one of your fake trades. The Miami one just writes itself.
No, you're right. I mean, I think the swapping Lowry for Robinson makes sense, just because like we're already knee deep in it right now. Like, I would rather have Duncan Robinson than a guy on a veteran minimum. Like, that's the reality certainly for the following year, because he's got a partial in 2024-25. It's the cleanest, in that perspective, compared to some of these other ones where, even like I went through like New York, right? Like, and like, let's just say, we just given them, as I said, like just expirings, and it's not RJ Barrett and stuff like that. But still, even if you're the Knicks, man, your salaries are starting to come up there, right? Like, eventually you got to extend quickly, and you still have Josh Hart, who could become a free agent. It certainly starts to add up. And I think either it's going to be a team that has already two max guys, and as I said, we'll figure out how to work around this, or it's got to be a team that's got like, three guys making 20 to 25 million there. And this would be your one max guy, like Houston, for example, based on how all their I'm not saying Beal and Houston, but just saying like, how the salaries are constructed.
I actually, New York makes a lot of sense, just in terms of Barrett plus salary filler, plus they have all the picks, and obviously they would really negotiate hard over which and how many, and it's not going to be the amount that they offered for Donovan Mitchell. They clearly need another offensive creator off the dribble. That's known. And, like, there's Jalen Brunson only has 2 years before he's a free agent again. Like, you could remake your team. I think they want to keep Jalen Brunson, obviously. When does he become extension eligible? Bobby, after next season?
This would be year 2 of 4. So after next season.
That's an interesting conversation for down the line. I just don't know if the money is just so big that I don't know if that's. I like the theory of, could we get him for half the price that we would have been given up for Donovan Mitchell and get similar level production for a couple of years and just sort of try to level up another level for a couple of years and then figure it out later if it's not working. I like that. Haven't heard a lot of buzz. Not sure Michael Winger and the new Wiz regime really like Barrett that much. Philly, you mentioned, they got the Harden thing. That's got to resolve itself first. And then, like, it's Tobias Harris and what?
Yeah.
Because if I'm the Sixers, I cannot trade Tyrese Maxey for Bradley Beal. I can't do it. I can't do it. That guy's a big game player. Bradley Beal's had some big games. I thought he was impressive early in his career in the playoffs. Had some big games against the Hawks and the Celtics in 2017. We just haven't seen him on that stage in quite a while. So I don't know what the Sixers path is. The Bucks, Wendy said on TV today the Bucks are in the thick of it. I haven't heard it quite to that extreme, but I do think
I just don't like, you look at Milwaukee, like, I mean, outside, certainly outside of Giannis and outside of, Drew Holiday, like how are you getting the numbers there, right? Like that's kind of the challenge there, unless it's Chris Middleton, right? Unless Middleton is opting in, and then you're basically putting a package around him and then figuring out what draft, like with a draft pick.
it wouldn't surprise me if the Bucks shook things up a little bit this summer. And I don't know what that means. Just wouldn't surprise me. Totally unrelated to this. And just complete wild, two guys over a beer in the playoffs after a game, spitballing a trade. One guy who was at our group pitched a trade that I just haven't stopped thinking about since. I think about it like 5 times every day. Drew Holiday for Karl Anthony Towns, straight up. Bobby Marks?
I would do that if I was Minnesota.
Givony?
I would do it if I'm Minnesota for sure. I don't think I'm doing it from Milwaukee.
Tim Connolly went hard after Drew Holiday in Denver. That trade is the kind of trade that makes both teams sick to their stomach, which means it's like kind of reasonable. Again, this is not a thing that I've heard any tell of anything like that. I just kind of like it as a concept because I do think Cat, we got to talk about Cat. We got to have the Cat sidebar now. I do think Cat in a new place with a clear alpha guy, and I don't necessarily mean personality. I mean, like, this guy's just better than you and you can't debate it. And it's his team and he runs the team and you're the new guy. I think he would look incredible in some scenarios like that. I saw the Pat Beverly podcast where he said when he hangs up his sneakers, he's going to be regarded as someone who changes the game, and reiterated for the 17th time that he's the greatest shooting big man ever. And sometimes you just got to bag it. You just got to pass on the opportunity to talk about how you change the game. And it's not just that the Wolves haven't won a playoff series with Karl Anthony Towns. It's that because they've been a tire fire for a long time. Coaches, GMs, bad trades, bad draft picks, bad signings. It's that Karl Anthony Towns in half his playoff games has just not been good. And now I do think his last 3 games in this first round, long forgotten, his last 3 games, he scored 70 points, so like 23 or 24 a game on 24 of 43 shooting, and was a problem for the Nuggets. I thought he maybe can build off those 3 games. He did foul out of the last 2, which is just an endless problem. Can we just like stop? First, no one's arguing about your shooting ability. No one. You're arguing with ghosts. Second of all, before you start talking about the way you've changed the game, can you A, turn 30 and B, win a playoff series? That's all. That's all I'm asking. I don't have any other thoughts. I like that trade, though. Milwaukee, you're right. It's complicated. Warriors?
What about Golden State? Right? You're about to say, yeah. What about Golden State?
So what's the trade?
Does Poole, Peyton, and whatever get whatever
Kuminga.
It's got to be Kuminga.
Yeah. If
they're getting anybody, it's got to be Kuminga.
I mean, they might want 2 of those guys. They might want Moody, also.
Well, good luck with that. It's got to be Kuminga. And it's depressing if I'm a Warriors fan that I still believe in Kuminga. I understand that there was a lot of sulking and pouting and the minutes went up and down and like that made people there unhappy. I think he's young and good and does stuff on the court that's really hard to find. And I would certainly take a flyer on him for my team. I understand why the Warriors would be like, wait a second. The great double track program would end with Gary Payton II and our other guy is a throw-in in the Bradley Beal, not a throw-in, but part of a Bradley Beal trade. And then Moody, who's a good, nice role player, probably that the team trusts. It's not awesome. I also just like Steph plus Beal plus Clay. To me, that's not the fit. To me, the salary just it's too big of a salary for me to make that the move if I'm the Warriors. That's just my take. Any other thoughts on them?
No, it's a good point. I mean, that's almost like the pool piece is, like, is that who you want to use it on?
Plus, like that combination of salaries you just mentioned comes like $3 million short of Beal's salary, which is not, you can still make the trade, but that $3 million for the Warriors that you're adding on is like, I think
Like
912 million when you factor in the repeater penalties.
Yeah.
Sacramento, Herder, Holmes, and Monk get you to just barely enough salary. And I got to throw in a pick or something. It's not crazy. Is it crazy? How much does that actually help your team? Putting 2 shooting guards in it for 1, both of whom had fantastic years for you, one of whom had a shaky playoffs and the other of whom was pretty awesome in the playoffs. Does that help your team that much? That's my question.
What does that do for Washington? I mean, at some point they're just going to say, we're just going to wait, let's wait until the season starts and somebody gets hurt and people start feeling pressure for their jobs. And that's when you could, get somebody to make a better trade than that. I just don't understand that. I mean, how many picks are in it, I guess, from Sacramento's side?
Well, they owe 1 still to the Hawks, right, Bobby?
Yeah, next year, 2024 protected.
Yeah, you're right. Maybe that doesn't do enough for either team. I've just been told, watch out for Sacramento.
Yeah, I mean, I guess
Vivek is in Monaco. Sorry, Vivek is in Paris today watching Victor Wembanyama. What does that mean?
So Herder, Holmes, and Monk for the number 1 pick. Is that what you're suggesting?
Maybe
instead of Brad Beal.
I was just surprised by that. I think he must be on vacation or something. He's like, let me just go watch like a really good basketball game.
What were we talking about? The Kings, Bobby? You wanted to say something about the Kings?
No, I mean, I think for what it does for the Wizards is you got a guy on making 16 million, basically a third of what Beal makes in Herder, and it basically I think a lot of it's just about getting that big number off your books here and stuff like that. I mean, the one team that was certainly thrown at me yesterday was like, what happens in Toronto? Does he make sense in Toronto? And I'm like, I don't know, that's the, what would it take for you to get to that number with the, with the Raptors?
I also got that same buzz in Toronto. There's just so many balls in the air for Toronto with Pirtle's free agency, Gary Trent's option, OG Anunoby's extension, Siakam's extension. Like, there's just too much. Van Vliet's free agency. I can't even keep track of what's going on in Toronto. It's too much. Do any of you, so the other subplot of this, and then I promise we'll get back to the draft, Givony. If Porzingis opts in and becomes a $36 million expiring contract, I actually think he'll have pretty good trade value, because I do think we might see a run on trades that will not be allowed in 2 years by teams that are over the second apron now and can aggregate salaries now and will not be able to in 2 years. By the way, it's June 15th. No CBA. Still, teams are starting to get a little impatient with, like, can we see the goddamn thing? Is it done? No, just wait. It's we're almost there. Well, the draft is in a week. Do any of you have any Porzingis destinations that you like?
I thought Indiana. I mean, that's just because they've got some buffer and room and they've got some, spare parts. They do have a boatload of draft picks, whether it be the two later ones in the late 20s there, and there's certainly a need at the they can go 4 or 5, and they might have even addressed that where they're picking there. I thought the Pacers could be a team to potentially take a flyer on him.
I like it. I don't know how he fits with Miles Turner, but maybe that's besides the point. Givony, you have any KP teams you like?
Not really, to be honest with you. I haven't spent a lot of time thinking about it.
Can I give you guys a few?
Of course.
Yeah.
All right, so just assume Toronto's included in all of these, and we'll just leave Toronto to the side. The Clippers are going to be if there's another trade that I'm certain is going to happen, it's that the Clippers are going to aggregate two of like the Powell, Batum, Morris, Covington contracts for a player. Does Porzingis be that? Put some spacing around PG and Kawhi, and I don't think that necessarily means you're moving on from Zubats, but you have two centers. That's fine. I think that's kind of an interesting fit. Chicago's a wild card to me, depending on what happens with Vucevic. Bobby, is this legal? Could Portland do like Nurkic plus Little plus sign and trade one of Thibault and who the hell's the other free agent? Reddish plus draft compensation for Porzingis?
Yeah, you could do that. I mean, you could do, add that up, get the one of those two Reddish or Thibault's number up there to make it work, and then you just got to figure out the draft compensation because you still owe the Bulls that pick from that was the Larry Nance trade from a few years ago. So you've got to figure out that part of it. But they've said Joe Cronin's been out front saying that if there's ever a trade out there, we'll adjust the compensation. So that's certainly legal.
I like that fit. A 3-point shooting center with Dame. I thought about the Hawks, and we'll get back to them. But they have a Okongwu kind of as the heir apparent, I think, at center. Boston, some interesting possibilities. My favorite one, I'm not saying I think it's gonna ever be discussed, but Cleveland coming off kind of a, our offense kind of shit the bed playoff run, and we don't know if Evan Mobley's ready to play center. We kind of want to take another leap now, and Jared Allen had a disappointing playoffs, and can we pay all four of these guys going forward? Is there a deal built around like Jared Allen plus salary filler for Porzingis? I kind of like that.
You can get there. I mean, you have Allen, Osman, Dean Wade, like numbers like that. They've got a bunch of these $7 million guys to get there.
I also thought about New Orleans because they have the Valanciunas and Nance pieces, and there's a lot of balls in the air there. That brings us back to the draft. Mr. Givony, there's been a lot of buzz about the Pelicans trying to move up into the top 3 to get Scoot Henderson. That has lent itself to a lot of buzz about, wait a second, how are they getting there? Can't be all draft picks. Does that mean the big fellow who's played 100 games and change in 4 years, could he be made available? What is your latest intel on the Pelicans and their intentions?
I've been told New Orleans is not trading Zion, no interest in trading Brandon Ingram, and I'd be very surprised if anything ended up happening there at 2 or 3. They were the number 1 team in the West last year when Zion went down with the injury. If he's healthy, which he rarely is, but when he's healthy, he's easily one of the best players in the NBA. So I don't see it happening, and I don't even know. So that was pretty much shot down to me, as a possibility, Zion to Charlotte
or Portland, either one.
Or Portland. They haven't even spoken with Portland, so. Yeah, I think New Orleans has made some calls, just to say, hey, what would it take to get to 1? What would it take to get to 2? But I don't think it went past.
Well, what would it take? What would it take to get to 1 is like the Saints. These
are the calls that NBA teams make, just to say, hey, what would it take? Not or making you an offer, but
I would love to be on the other end of that call. No. I would actually say, so here's what it would take. The Saints, the Vince Lombardi trophy from a few years ago, which is probably not even a few years ago anymore because I'm old. One vintage paper bag from the time when the Saints were the Aints. The Superdome. I don't know, probably more. That's interesting because I don't know. I don't know what to make of that because Houston was always the team that made the most logical sense of like, well, what the hell? We've got a lot of assets. Let's trade something for Zion and be relevant and pop the market a little bit. But they're only 4. Like they that doesn't get you into Scoot range. If Scoot's the target, you can do things with 4, but I don't think you can get up to 3 or 2. Houston and Detroit are sitting at 4 and 5, and that's where like the draft trade, it doesn't stop there. Like there could be movement there, but that's where you start hearing the Thompson twins. Some people have them mocked a little lower than that. Is the latest that those teams are just going to stay put, or is there still like buzz that they could maneuver around a little bit?
I haven't heard a ton coming out of Detroit or Houston. I mean, I think the assumption is that both teams want to be good next year, and they would explore, trade scenarios that, got them, some veteran pieces that, help them win games next year. But there's just not a lot of teams around the league who are looking to offload those type of guys. And you're not just going to give away the number 4, number 5 picks. So it's hard to find, like the right pieces in a trade, is my understanding. Those are very valuable picks. And I don't know that teams are offering, really, really good players off the roster because nobody wants to take a step back, like Amen Thompson is an incredible talent. Cam Whitmore, super talent, but you're not going to be good, like building your team around Amen Thompson next year. So it's like, what is that, who really wants to take that huge step backwards? It's a very small list.
There is a not a man of mystery, but a man of rising and kind of all over the place draft stock that you want to talk about that is currently mocked in your latest mock draft on ESPN.com to the Thunder at number 12, and that's Kobe Buffkin. Tell me about Kobe Buffkin and tell everyone listening what you are hearing about Kobe Buffkin.
Yeah, so Kobe Buffkin is a sophomore from Michigan, but he's actually younger than a lot of the freshmen in this draft. He's younger than Jarris Walker, younger than Hood Schifino. He's younger than the Thompson twins and Brandon Miller. And he finished off the year in a pretty spectacular way. The last 12, 14 games of the season in the Big Ten, when Michigan really finally put the ball in his hands, he did some very, very impressive things. He averaged, 19 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists per game. He shot the ball extremely well, 47% for 3 in that time. And then you look at the build, he's 6'5.5", 6'8" wingspan, 187 pounds. And he is just a tenacious defender. And people are starting to, as the process has gone along, he's interviewed extremely well. Everybody's looking for that type of guard who is, tough, versatile, not ball dominant, high character, 19 years old, has upside as a shooter and as a ball handler. And everybody's tried to get him on their books, bring him in for a workout. And pretty much people have run into a brick wall there. Nobody's really been able to get him in their gym. He had some workouts scheduled, earlier on with New Orleans, with Atlanta, with Utah, 14, 15, 16. All of those were canceled. And, even some teams ahead of them have been unable to get him in their gym. So now the thought process is, does Kobe Buffkin have a promise? Did somebody shut him down? Does he know where he's going? Why can nobody get Kobe Buffkin in their gym? The only thing that they've seen of him is this pro day that he had in Los Angeles, where everybody says he was very, very impressive and he really helped the standing. It's a pro day, you take it with a grain of salt, but the buzz out of that pro day was very, very strong. And now you're starting to hear his name at Washington at 8, Utah at 9, Orlando 11, OKC 12. strongly in Toronto at 13. And, the question now is like, where are they trying to maneuver him to? What are the teams in that range that, have a big opening in the backcourt? Like you look at Washington for sure, Utah, definitely, the Raptors for sure. So, that's kind of one of the the mini storylines that I'll be watching on draft night is where is Kobe Buffkin going to end up?
Well, and Oklahoma City, just going back from my days in Brooklyn, man, they have a track record of promising guys.
And he's represented by Wasserman and
yeah,
Jason
I mean,
Rainey, his
Mitch,
agent, worked with OKC, but OKC says we haven't been able to get this guy in our gym either. We don't have a medical on
fair.
him.
Yeah, I mean, Mitch McGarry basically went and he was in the witness protection program for a whole month, and then Reggie Jackson was a guarantee. So, like, yeah, I mean, if the Thunder are in the same boat as everyone else, then you can totally totally understand it from their perspective.
Campaign. I mean, there's a long line of guys that Pokashevsky, that everybody had a promise from Oklahoma City, and I
haven't thought about Poku in a couple months. Thanks for bringing Poku back into my life. I thought Poku was all right last year. I mean, in phases. Every time you say Kobe Buffkin, my brain, and this will date me, thinks of the old animatronic teddy bear toy Teddy Ruxpin. Every time you say Kobe Buffkin, I think of Teddy Ruxpin for the older listeners.
I don't see it being Oklahoma City because they have their starting backcourt in place already. Josh Giddey and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, those guys aren't going anywhere anytime soon. I could see his camp targeting one of these teams with a wide open backcourt where he can go in, and his value, if he hits, is as a big point guard, and so he's going to need to, have some freedom to make mistakes, and have opportunity. And the Thunder, very excited roster, but they're pretty stacked right now with young talent.
I didn't research this. It just popped into my head right now. I wonder if either of you guys know off the top of your head. Is there a famous example of a broken draft day promise?
Ooh.
Was it Rashard Lewis maybe, or I don't want to throw anybody to the bus
because that's awkward. There have definitely been times where teams have made promises not thinking that another guy would be on the board, and then that guy's on the board and they have a moment of like, woof, well, we made the promise. We got to take the guy we promised. We kind of want the other guy, but we got to take the guy we promised. That's the only reason I asked.
That's the danger. I mean, we promised, I'm really going to date back to here. We promised Zoran Planinic, I think in 2002 or 2003. And man, you put yourself in an awkward position if a trade comes about, or if there's a guy on the board that you love and that's falling, all of a sudden fallen, and you're staring at him as far as what you do. And I always say is that, you burn the agent and we'll come back and get you somewhere down the road.
Teams are very reluctant to promise guys at any point in a draft. There are a lot of players at the withdrawal deadline who said, hey, would you promise me a two-way? Would you promise me you'll take me in the 40s? Would you promise me, like an undrafted, roster spot? And teams are they don't want to box themselves in. Like, you just don't know who's going to fall there. What trades are available. And so it's just very hard, that everybody throws around. Everybody's got a promise this time of year, but it's very, very rare in actuality.
There are no backsies, is what you're telling me, in the NBA promise game. No backsies. A couple other teams. The next team in line is Orlando. Orlando is number 6 and number 11, courtesy of the Bulls, and a lot of cap space. And I think finally, has reached a stage where they would like to win more basketball games next year. They were a 500 team basically over the last 50 games. So I think their goal is going to be the playoffs next year. 6 and 11 looks like it gives you a lot of optionality. Like, they could package it and move up, or they could package it for a veteran. It's not quite as powerful a combination as I think maybe it looks on paper, but is there any Orlando is like a black box dating to last year when people didn't know who the number 1 pick was going to be until it was made. Is there any Orlando buzz of any kind?
I think that there is the thought that the number 11 pick is attainable, but at the same time, if you look at the tiers of the draft, it's right around 11 that it starts to break down. And so I don't think they're going to do anything before they're actually on the clock and they see who's available to them. A guy like Grady Dick from Kansas, 6'7", probably the best shooter in the draft, could very well be there at 11. And, so what does it take to get there? I'm not sure. And, what pieces from their roster are available in trades. So I don't know. I mean, we always talk about trades and then it's going to be a bonanza of trades. And then it very rarely materializes, like especially in the lottery. I mean, there will be a lot of trades like the back half of the first round. Every pick in the second round will be traded like 17 times. But in the lottery, I don't know how many trades we're going to see.
Indiana comes in at 7. They also have 26, 29, and 32. That's a lot. I've heard teams have called Indiana trying to get 7, but I don't think there's been any traction there. And those back end first round picks, there are some teams who, like you said, the draft kind of falls off at 11, wherever you think the draft falls off, right? There are some teams who kind of like those picks more than like 15, 16, 17, because the salary is a little cheaper. But that's a lot of picks in one draft. Indiana, between Halliburton and Turner, when healthy, has, they were right in the thick of the playoff and then play-in race before everybody got injured. Any Indiana buzz from either of you?
They're going to definitely look to move some of these picks. I mean, they have 5 of them. Nobody wants to roster 5 rookies, even if, that 55 is probably a 2-way. Even 4 rookies is just way too much. They have so many young players in their roster. So I could definitely see them, taking 26, 29, 32, calling somebody like the Lakers at 17 and saying, hey, do you want to, I think the Lakers, that could be very interesting for them, getting a bunch of cheap contracts. There's this draft has a lot of depth, and I think it would be the kind of move that maybe happen on the clock, but I could see that, trying to think who the Warriors maybe is another team that, is in, salary cap hell there. And so we saw the trade with Denver getting the 37th pick from Oklahoma City last week. I mean, some of those second round picks they're gonna have some value on draft night just because of that new second round exception. It's pretty attractive for teams.
I also think. Oh, sorry, Zach. I also think
go.
What teams are doing too is that they're looking ahead towards I know this is like 2028, 2029, like Oklahoma City, for example. Like eventually you're going to have to pay Josh Giddey, right? And eventually you're going to have to pay, Jalen Williams down the road. So when you have all these, if you can parlay draft picks now into something 4 years from now, it just gives you, more, security. I think you could see that with, Orlando. I mean, at 36, for example, which is a good number. You can move that for something, if it's multiple 2s in 2028 or 2027, because when Banchero and Wagner and those guys, when they're coming off their rookie contracts and those numbers start to be costly.
It's a great point. I love that trade for Denver. I loved it. Like, what a statement of like, we're going to keep whatever we can do with this guy and these 2 guys in Murray and Jokic, we are going to do. And the Lakers have drafted, Givony mentioned the Lakers pick, maybe, looking to pick up multiple bites at the apple. I mean, that's a team that has drafted really well late in the draft for the last 6 or 7 years. They've gotten a lot of value out of those picks. A couple other addendums that I forgot to say. Herder, I mentioned Herder and the Kings and Beal and all that. Herder and Beal had the same agent, so that's an interesting little nugget there. And I forgot a Porzingis trade. This is maybe too crazy for Earth, but what about Ayton? What about a deal with Ayton and Porzingis as the principals? Does that make any sense to anybody? No, I'm hearing no.
The only thing I can like for me with Ayton is like I want to, if you're going to move him, it's almost like I'm breaking it up until 3 players, and then I've got to worry about re-signing Porzingis. That's probably like my biggest
Or
concern.
maybe I don't, and that's part of the
Yeah.
point.
And maybe I have more, I go into next offseason with cap space, and I'm using that flexibility to, here's my one big swing with Booker and Durant to add another marquee guy.
All right. I'm going to open the floor to each of you. Jonathan first. Pick a team or a prospect that you're dying to talk about from the draft perspective that we have not hit in this podcast. It could be anybody, anything you want.
I'm just really curious to see what Golden State does. You hear from teams that they're being pretty aggressive, making calls, seeing what they can get, potentially in the lottery or the mid first. Kuminga's name has been out there since the trade deadline as potentially being available. And then you see some of the workouts that they're conducting. They seem to be targeting older players and telling people that, agents and other teams, like, we overloaded our coaching staff with developmental type prospects the last few years. We're done with that. We want guys that know how to play basketball, that can come in and fit our style of play, that know how to pass, know how to cut, know how to guard off the ball, not going to complain about their roles, about their minutes. And so, what they do here, on draft night is going to kind of set the tone, I think, for how their summer looks.
And Bobby, to you, is there, from a free agency or trade perspective, is there a team we didn't hit or barely hit that you are really interested in talking about, or a player like a free agent to be, or a trade target that we didn't hit or barely hit that you're dying to talk about?
I mean, I think Houston kind of controls free agency, right? Just because they're the leader in the clubhouse with $62 million. We've said all along, I think if there's a team out there that would give, my question for them would be, are you willing to commit $47 million to James Harden and only have a sliver left for the rest of your roster? Or do you want to get cute in free agency and see if you can split that? Is Harden going to go there for $34 million? That's the biggest thing. I think they control free agency because there's kind of like a domino effect. Not certainly there, but certainly what happens with Philadelphia also.
Yeah, that's the first pivot point, is Harden, to me, because if Harden stays, that means, probably kind of stability in Philly. And if Harden leaves, again, I've said, I'm sure Daryl Morey has 15 contingency plans lined up. For me, one of those would definitely not be any deal where I'm sending out Maxey for Bradley Beal. I'm just not doing that. Harden, by the way, it's ancient history. What a weird postseason for him. He either had like incredible games or horrible games, and basically nothing in between. And the last two were of the horrible variety. And I don't know, man. If I'm Houston, I understand. Like Stephen A. Smith outlined this on First Take yesterday with some force, let's say. I understand all the reasons and the forces behind that. I just, from a team building perspective, it's not what I would do if I were Houston. All right.
Well, Doc Rivers didn't help on the Bill Simmons podcast.
What do you say?
Oh,
I haven't gotten there yet.
He buried him.
Really?
He as much as you can bury a guy, he buried him. As far as how it was, he was very asked. Bill asked him if he was easy to coach, and he said no, because he wanted to play one style and I wanted to coach one style, and they were totally different.
What styles were those, respectively? Like, so James Harden wants to play the I dribble all the time style, and Doc Rivers wants to play what style exactly? Throw the ball to Joel style?
Move the ball.
There's not a lot of ball movement going on in Philly's offense, even when it's Embiid, who couldn't get the ball for the last 5 minutes of Game 6 in Philadelphia. And then, then they just didn't show up in Game 7. All right, anyway, look, it's going to be a busy offseason. Bobby Marks, must read. All the offseason guides are up, all 30 now. I think your championship offseason guide should just be a picture of Mike Malone drinking champagne. Michael Malone, sorry.
Me and my editor would be happy about that.
And Jonathan Givony, how many more mock drafts are we going to have between now and the draft? At least 3, probably.
We're going to have one that gets updated pretty much every day, and probably once an hour on the day of the draft.
Go get a nap in or something. You guys are unbelievable at what you do. Appreciate the time, and I will see you both soon. you.